The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. In all that time, the Great Assembly of Stars had known peace. Wars were stories from a distant past, told in history classes to young minds who could not imagine such violence. The Council was made of 47 species, each one advanced and wise in their own way. They had learned long ago that cooperation was the only path forward. Trade flowed like water between worlds. Knowledge was shared freely. Ships moved from star to star without fear. When humanity made first contact, the Council welcomed them with open arms. The small blue planet called Earth had produced a curious species. They were young, barely taking their first steps into space, but they were clever and the Council saw potential in them. They were the first to greet them, their silver skin shining under the lights of the diplomatic station. The sent gifts of art and music, the shared knowledge of the stars. Everyone wanted to help the young species grow. Ambassador of the was assigned to guide the human delegation through their first year. There were tall beings with skin like polished silver and eyes that glowed soft blue. They had been part of the Council for 9,000 years, was considered one of their finest diplomats, patient and kind, perfect for helping a new species find their place. He watched the humans with great interest as they walked into the diplomatic hall for their first official meeting. There were 3 of them. 2 wore formal clothing, dark suits that seemed stiff and uncomfortable. But the 3rd wore a uniform of dark green with medals on the chest. A soldier realized. How strange. Why would a diplomatic delegation include a soldier? The lead human introduced herself as Director Sarah. She was small by standards, with dark hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. She spoke with careful words, always measuring her sentences before speaking. Found this charming at first. It showed wisdom, he thought. Caution in choosing words was a good trait. Over the following weeks, the humans began their integration into galactic society. They asked many questions, which was expected. New species always had questions. They wanted to know about trade routes and resource sharing. They asked about medical advances and cultural exchanges. They were curious about the different species and their histories. These were normal things, the questions that any newcomer would ask. But they also asked questions that made uncomfortable. What weapons did the Council possess? What defensive systems protected the trade routes? Were there military forces stationed at key points? What emergency protocols existed if a threat emerged from outside known space? What would happen if one of the member species turned hostile? Did anyone maintain standby forces for crisis response? Explained patiently that such things were not needed. The galaxy had been at peace for. There were no threats. The very idea of military force was outdated. All conflicts were resolved through negotiation and compromise. Violence was a relic of primitive times. The humans listened. They nodded, but they did not seem convinced. Director wrote notes on a small device, her face giving nothing away. The soldier, a man named General Torres, asked follow-up questions about response times and coordination protocols. Found himself growing frustrated. "You must understand," he said finally, "there is nothing to fear. The Council has ensured peace for 12,000 years. We have no enemies. We need no weapons. Trust is the foundation of our society." Director looked at him with those sharp eyes. "We appreciate your patience, Ambassador. We are simply trying to understand how things work here. On Earth, we have learned to prepare for many possibilities. It is part of our nature." "Your nature will change," said kindly. "When you see how peaceful the galaxy truly is, you will let go of these fears." In the months that followed, humanity officially joined the Council. They were given a seat in the Great Assembly, though it was a small one. A young species did not carry much weight in matters of galactic governance, but the humans worked hard. They traded fairly. They shared their culture and learned from others. They built relationships with many species. Many Council members grew fond of them. Yet there were concerns. The humans did not stop asking their uncomfortable questions. They requested access to historical records about conflicts and disasters. They studied the defensive capabilities of Council stations and ships, even though those capabilities were minimal. They asked about evacuation procedures and emergency supply routes. More troubling, they began building things. Human colonies on the outer worlds constructed bunkers deep underground. Their ships, unlike the elegant vessels of other species, were heavy and armored with redundant systems and escape pods. They maintained stockpiles of food and medicine far beyond what seemed necessary. They trained their population in survival skills, teaching even children how to respond to emergencies. And they built weapons. High Counselor Merkava called a private meeting 6 months after humanity joined. There were ancient beings, their bodies made of pure light contained in crystal shells. Merk had led the council for 300 years. He was wise beyond measure, and his word carried great power throughout the galaxy. 20 senior council members attended the meeting. Was among them. The chamber was quiet and serious, filled with beings who had known nothing but peace for their entire lives. "We must discuss the humans," Merk said. His voice rang like bells in the chamber, echoing off the walls. "Their behavior troubles me." Counselor of the leaned forward. There were short, four-armed beings covered in soft blue fur. They were known for their quick minds and sharp opinions. "What behavior concerns you, High Counselor?" "They maintain military forces," Merk said. "Not small ones. Large armies, fleets of warships, weapons of terrible power. They have built bunkers on there and their colonies. They stockpile food and resources as if expecting disaster. They train their population in survival skills. Their government has entire departments dedicated to preparing for catastrophes that have not happened and show no sign of happening." The council members murmured among themselves. This was strange behavior indeed. "I have observed this as well," said Counselor of the. There were graceful beings with 4 wings and large compound eyes. They were artists and dreamers, lovers of beauty and harmony. They call it preparedness. They say it is part of their nature. Their history, they explain, was filled with unexpected disasters. They cannot bring themselves to stop preparing. "It is paranoia," said Counselor dismissively. "They are a young species. They have known conflict among themselves for most of their history. Wars, plagues, natural disasters. Their world was harsh, and it made them fearful. They will learn that such things are not needed in our community. Time and exposure to our peaceful ways will cure them of this sickness." Thought of Director and her careful questions. He thought of General Tours and his endless notes about response protocols. "Perhaps we should try to understand their thinking," he suggested. "Their history was violent, yes, but perhaps that history taught them lessons we should hear. Perhaps their caution comes from wisdom rather than fear." Merk's crystal form flickered with light. What lessons could violence teach that peace cannot? They cling to old fears like children afraid of the dark. The dark holds nothing. There are no monsters under the bed. They will see this in time. We must be patient with them. The council agreed to speak with the humans, not to criticize but to guide. They would help humanity understand that caution was no longer needed. The galaxy was safe. It had been safe for 12,000 years. It would remain safe forever. Director received the council delegation with respect. She offered them refreshments and comfortable seating. She listened to their concerns without interrupting. She smiled and nodded at appropriate moments. But when they finished speaking, she asked a simple question that hung in the air like a blade. "What if you are wrong?" The delegation did not understand. They looked at each other in confusion. "We have been right for 12,000 years," said gently. "Our peace is not luck. It is the result of wisdom and cooperation. We have built systems and relationships that make conflict impossible. Trust us, Director. You do not need your weapons. You do not need your bunkers. You do not need your fear." Director was quiet for a long moment. She looked out the window at the stars beyond, at the peaceful galaxy that surrounded them. Then she spoke slowly, choosing each word with the same care she always used. On Earth, we have a saying, hope for the best but prepare for the worst. We do not keep weapons because we want war. We keep them because we know that wanting peace does not always mean having peace. Our history taught us this lesson again and again, written in blood and tears. She turned to face them. We watched nations fall because they believed safety was permanent. We saw civilizations crumble because they forgot how to defend themselves. We learned that trust is precious, but trust is also vulnerable. The Roman Empire trusted its walls. The Chinese dynasties trusted their armies. The great nations of our modern era trusted their treaties and alliances. All of them fell to threats they did not expect and could not stop. She paused. Her voice grew softer but no less firm. You have had peace for 12,000 years. That is wonderful. Truly, it is remarkable. But has anyone asked why? Have you ever wondered if there was once something that threatened the galaxy? Something that was defeated or driven away? Something that might return? 12,000 years is a long time for us. But in the life of a galaxy, it is nothing at all. The delegation exchanged looks. Such questions seemed foolish. The past was the past. What mattered was the present, the peace they had built and maintained for so long. We mean no offense, said. We simply want to help you move beyond your fears. Director smiled. It was a strange smile, sad and knowing, the smile of someone who sees something others cannot. And we mean no offense when we say that we will keep our weapons, we will keep our bunkers, we will keep our preparations. Not because we distrust the Council, but because we have learned through blood and suffering that the universe does not care about our wishes. Peace is precious, but peace is also fragile. We will not bet our survival on hope alone. The delegation left without reaching an agreement. Over the following years, they tried again and again to convince the humans. They showed them the statistics, the history, the proof of lasting peace. They brought scientists and philosophers to explain why military thinking was obsolete. They offered incentives and applied gentle pressure. The humans listened. They appreciated the effort, but they did not change. The Council began to laugh at humanity behind closed doors. They called them the paranoid species, the fearful ones, the young fools who could not let go of their primitive instincts. Some Council members found it endearing, like a child who checks under the bed for monsters every night. Others found it annoying, a waste of resources that could be spent on better things. 50 years passed. Humanity grew and prospered. Their population spread across a dozen worlds. They built stations and outposts throughout their sector. They traded and cooperated like good Council members. Their art and music gained appreciation. Their scientists made valuable contributions to galactic knowledge. But they never stopped their preparations. Every human world had bunkers. Every colony had emergency supplies for years of isolation. Every ship carried weapons and trained crews. They ran drills and exercises. They maintained standing forces. They planned for disasters that had never happened and enemies that did not exist. The universe watched and waited, and somewhere in the empty void between galaxies, something ancient began to stir. The first sign was a missing ship, a trade vessel from the failed to arrive at its destination. This was unusual but not alarming. Ships had mechanical problems from time to time. Routes sometimes needed adjustment for cosmic phenomena. They filed a report with standard protocols and sent another ship to investigate. That ship also vanished. Now the Council paid attention. 2 ships missing in the same region was concerning. They analyzed the data and found nothing unusual in that sector of space. No anomalies, no hazards, no explanation. They sent a probe to scan the area, a simple automated device designed to observe and report. The probe transmitted data for 30 seconds before its signal cut out. In those 30 seconds, it captured an image that would change everything. Something vast moved in the darkness between stars, something that should not exist, something that the Council had forgotten long ago, buried in ancient records that no one read anymore. The image was blurry, distorted by some unknown force, but it showed enough. Shapes that twisted and shifted, darkness that seemed to have weight and form, something hungry. High Counselor Merc called an emergency session within the hour. His crystal form pulsed with colors no one had ever seen before. Fear, realized with a chill. The High Counselor was afraid. In 300 years of leadership, Merc had never shown fear. "The silence has returned," Merc said. His voice did not ring like bells now. It cracked like breaking glass, sharp and painful. The chamber erupted in chaos. Many council members did not understand. The younger species had never heard the name. But the oldest ones, the ones who had been part of the council for thousands of years, they knew. They trembled with ancient terror passed down through generations. Some began to weep. Others simply stared in blank horror. Felt cold. He had read the old histories in his youth. He had thought them myths, exaggerated tales from a primitive time, stories to scare children. Now he understood they were memories, real memories of real horrors. The silence had nearly destroyed the galaxy 15,000 years ago. They were not a species in the normal sense. They were something else entirely, something that consumed and absorbed everything they touched. They did not negotiate because they did not speak. They did not communicate because they had no need. They simply fed. They devoured stars and planets and civilizations, leaving nothing but emptiness behind. That was why they were called the Silence. Where they passed, nothing remained to make a sound. The ancient council had defeated them through terrible sacrifice. Billions had died. Entire species had been wiped out completely, their names forgotten. Worlds had been destroyed to slow the advance. In the end, the Silence had been driven into the void between galaxies, pushed out through a combined effort that nearly broke the survivors. The survivors had believed them gone forever. They had built their peace on that belief. They had put away their weapons and forgotten how to fight. They had trusted that the nightmare was over. They had been wrong. "How is this possible?" Counselor demanded, his voice high with panic. "The records say they were destroyed." "The records say they were driven away," Merc corrected wearily. "We hoped they would die in the void. We assumed nothing could survive that emptiness. We were fools. They survived. They healed. They grew strong again, and now they have returned." The council fell silent. 12,000 years of peace had left them utterly unprepared for this moment. They had no armies. They had no weapons. They had no plans for war. Their ships were built for comfort and speed, not combat. Their populations had never trained for conflict. They had nothing but their trust and their hope. And trust and hope could not stop the Silence. Thought of Director and her careful questions from 50 years ago. He thought of her sad smile. He thought of her words about peace being fragile. He thought of all the times the council had laughed at humanity's paranoia. "The humans," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence. "We need to contact the humans." The council turned to look at him. "What can the humans do?" asked. His voice was dismissive even now, even in the face of extinction. "They are a young species, small, weak, primitive." "They are prepared," said firmly. "They never stop preparing. They have ships and weapons and soldiers. They have plans for exactly this kind of threat. They have been waiting for 50 years for something like this." Merc's form flickered uncertainly. "They have been preparing for 50 years. The Silence destroyed civilizations that had prepared for centuries. What can 50 years accomplish?" "Then we have already lost," said. "Unless we try, let me contact them. Let me ask for their help. What other choice do we have? We have nothing, they have something. It may not be enough, but it is all we have." The council hesitated, pride warred with fear. For so long they had laughed at humanity. They had called them paranoid, foolish, primitive, childish. Now they needed to beg those same humans for salvation. "Do it," Merc said finally. "Contact the humans, tell them everything, and pray that their preparations are enough." Sent the message immediately. He did not know if it would change anything. He did not know if humanity could save them. But he knew one thing for certain. The universe had stopped laughing at humanity's caution. Director was old now. 78 years had passed since first contact. She had retired from diplomatic service years ago, but she still kept informed. She still watched the stars. She still maintained contacts in the government. She still waited. When the emergency message arrived at Earth Command, they called her immediately. She read it 3 times, her wrinkled hand steady on the tablet. Then she smiled that same sad smile from long ago. "I hoped we would be wrong," she said softly. "Every day for 50 years I hoped we were just being paranoid. I hoped they were right about us." But hope was never enough. Preparation was what mattered. And humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first ape picked up a rock and thought about tomorrow. The Council had scoffed at humanity's caution. Now they would see its value. The truth was about to strike fierce. Director picked up her communicator and called the Earth Defense Council. "This is Director," she said, her voice clear and strong despite her age. "Code Black. The ancient enemy has returned. Begin Operation Prometheus. Wake the fleets. Open the arsenals. Tell them the time has come." Across human space, alarms began to sound. Ships powered up from cold storage. Soldiers reported to stations. Bunkers activated their long-dormant systems. Emergency protocols triggered cascading responses throughout the human territories. Humanity had been waiting for this. They had always been waiting. Now it was time to show the universe why they had never stopped checking under the bed for monsters. Fleet Admiral James had been a soldier for 40 years. He had trained for war his entire life, even though he had never fought one. People had called him paranoid, just like they called all humans paranoid. They had said he was wasting his time maintaining readiness for an enemy that would never come. The galaxy was at peace, they told him. There would never be a war. James had smiled and kept training. He had studied the ancient records of the silence, the fragmentary histories that survived from 15,000 years ago. He had analyzed their tactics, such as they were. He had worked with scientists to develop weapons that might hurt something made of shadow and hunger. He had planned responses to scenarios that everyone told him would never happen. Now standing on the bridge of the United Earth ship Prometheus, he looked at the tactical display with calm eyes. The silence had already consumed 3 worlds, billions of lives gone in days. They moved faster than anyone expected. Their forces were vast, a spreading darkness that swallowed everything in its path. But James was not afraid. Fear was a luxury he could not afford. He had work to do. "Status report," he ordered. Commander Lisa Park checked her screens. She was young, barely 30, but she had trained her entire life for this just as James had. First Fleet is in position. Second and Third Fleets are 20 hours out. Fourth Fleet is escorting civilian evacuation from the endangered sectors. James nodded. "The Council species." "In chaos, sir. Most of them have no military command structure to speak of. They're trying to coordinate evacuation, but they don't have enough ships designed for rapid transit. Their vessels are too slow, too vulnerable. They're losing millions of civilians every hour to the advance." James felt a pang of sorrow. He had nothing against the Council species. He had friends among the and the. They had simply forgotten what danger looked like. They had grown soft in their long peace, trusting in safety that was never guaranteed. Now they were paying the price for that trust. "Tell them to follow our evacuation routes," James said. "We'll protect what we can. Get them behind our lines." "Sir," Lisa hesitated. "Some of their leaders are angry. They're demanding to know why we didn't share our military technology over the past 50 years. They're saying we could have helped them prepare. They're accusing us of hoarding defenses while they remained vulnerable." James laughed. It was a bitter sound with no humor in it. "We offered, dozens of times over the decades. They refused every time. They said weapons were primitive and unnecessary. They said military thinking was a disease they didn't want to catch. They told us we were paranoid children afraid of the dark." Lisa was quiet. There was nothing to say to that. But that doesn't matter now, James continued, his voice hardening. We're not here to say I told you so. We're not here to gloat or demand apologies. We're here to save as many lives as we can, regardless of who laughed at us. That's what humans do. Prepare the fleet for engagement. The Prometheus was the flagship of the human fleet, a massive vessel bristling with weapons that the Council had once called barbaric and uncivilized. It was not beautiful like ships. It was not elegant like cruisers. It was functional, heavy, armored, built for one purpose only. Around it, 500 warships moved into formation. They were not the elegant vessels of the Council species, built for beauty and comfort and peaceful travel. They were weapons of war. They had redundant systems, ablative armor, escape pods, emergency protocols for dozens of disaster scenarios. They were built to fight, to survive, to endure. The silence approached. On the tactical display, they appeared as a spreading stain of darkness. Their ships, if they could be called ships, did not follow normal physics. They shifted and changed constantly, like living shadows made of hunger. Sensors struggled to lock onto them, readings flickering and failing. Contact in 15 minutes, Lisa reported. James took a deep breath. All hands, this is the Admiral. We trained for this day. We prepared for this moment. Every drill, every exercise, every simulation was practice for what we face now. The enemy is ancient and powerful. They destroyed civilizations before our species even existed. They have fed on stars and devoured worlds. He paused, letting his words settle, but they have never faced humanity. He looked at the darkness approaching on his screen. We are stubborn, we are cautious, we are paranoid. We check under the bed for monsters every single night and we keep weapons under our pillows. When we find monsters there, we do not run. We do not beg. We fight. We fight because we must. We fight because no one else can. We fight because that is what humans have always done. His voice rose, carrying through every ship in the fleet. Today we show the universe why we never stop preparing. Today we show them that hope is not enough. You need strength. You need will. You need weapons in your hands and fire in your heart and the determination to never give up. Today we teach the silence something they have never learned in all their billions of years. He raised his fist. That humanity does not go quietly into the dark. We rage against it. We burn it away. We survive. And we make damn sure our friends survive with us. For Earth, for humanity, for everyone who laughed at us and everyone who needs us now. Let's show them what paranoia is worth. The fleet roared its answer, a chorus of voices from 500 ships. The battle began at 600 Galactic Standard Time. It would last for 3 days and become legendary. The silence came in waves. They did not use tactics in the normal sense, no formations or strategies that human minds could understand. They simply flooded forward, an endless tide of shadow and hunger. Their weapons were strange, not energy beams or projectiles, but something else entirely. Something that drained life directly. Ships touched by the silence withered and died. Their hulls corroded in seconds. Their crews became empty shells, all life and energy devoured. The Council species had no defense against this. Their ships were meant for transport and exploration, beautiful vessels never designed for combat. They shattered like glass when the silence touched them. But the human ships held. Humanity had spent 50 years studying the silence from ancient records. They had developed weapons specifically designed to hurt something that seemed beyond physics. Concentrated light beams at specific frequencies burned through shadow. Specially tuned sonic pulses disrupted their shifting forms. Heavy kinetic rounds, simple metal projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, tore holes in their structures. The silence had never faced anything like it. Target Cluster 7 destroyed, Lisa reported, her voice sharp with focus. Cluster 8 is breaking formation. They seem confused. James watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. They've never met resistance before, not real resistance. The ancient species fought them with desperation, not preparation. They don't know how to react when we push back effectively. Press the advantage. All ships, maximum aggression. Don't give them time to adapt. The human fleet surged forward. They took losses, severe losses that would haunt James for the rest of his life. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Crews died screaming as the darkness touched them. Every death was a knife in James's heart. But for every human ship that fell, 10 silence constructs were destroyed. The exchange rate was brutal, but it was sustainable. For the first time in 15,000 years, the silence was losing. On the second day, the silence changed tactics. They stopped their direct assault and began flanking maneuvers, trying to get around the human formation. They were learning. They were adapting. This was new, and it worried James deeply. James adapted too. He pulled his fleet back, created defensive corridors, forced the silence to funnel through kill zones where concentrated firepower could destroy them efficiently. He used asteroids and debris as cover. He set traps with explosive devices hidden in apparently dead ships, luring the silence in and destroying them. Every advantage the silence gained, James countered. Every adaptation they made, he matched. It was a deadly chess game played across millions of kilometers of space. On the third day, the silence threw everything they had at the human lines. It was their final gambit, a massive concentration of their forces. They sensed that something was wrong, that these small creatures were not like the others. They wanted to end the threat before it could grow further. James had been waiting for this. He had seen it coming in their patterns, understood their desperation. "All ships execute pattern Omega," he ordered calmly. The human fleet suddenly scattered, creating apparent gaps in their formation. It looked like chaos, like the line was breaking under pressure. The silence poured through the gaps, seeking the vulnerable ships behind. They found missiles, thousands of missiles hiding in the shadow of human vessels, waiting. Each missile carried a special payload, a concentrated burst of the frequencies that hurt the silence most. Weapons designed specifically for this moment. The missiles detonated simultaneously. The silence screamed. It was not a sound that ears could hear. It was something deeper, a psychic wail of pain and confusion that echoed through the minds of every being in the sector. Their ranks shattered. Their constructs tore themselves apart, unable to maintain cohesion. "All ships full attack," James commanded. "Drive them back. Don't let them reform, push them now." The human fleet charged through the chaos. They fired everything they had, a storm of destruction that cut through the wounded silence. The enemy, already hurt, could not withstand the assault. They began to retreat, pulling back toward the void from which they had come. But James was not finished. "Launch the Nova weapons," he said quietly. Lisa looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, those are our last resort. If they don't work, we have nothing left to stop them." "They'll work," James said. His voice was absolutely certain. "We built them for this exact moment. Trust our engineers, trust our scientists, trust 50 years of preparation and planning. This is what we made them for." The Nova weapons launched. They were massive devices, almost the size of small ships, containing technology that humanity had developed in secret for decades. They accelerated toward the retreating silence and detonated at the center of their mass. The explosions were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were artificial stars, burning with a light specifically engineered to destroy shadow. The frequencies, the wavelengths, the patterns of energy were all calculated to unmake the silence. Those caught in the blast simply ceased to exist. They did not die in the normal sense. They were erased, their shadows burned away by light. The survivors fled. They ran back into the void between galaxies, shrieking and broken. The human fleet pursued them to the edge of known space, making sure they kept running, making sure they understood that there would be no safety if they returned. Then James ordered his ships to stop. "Let them go," he said. "Let them carry the memory of this day. Let them remember what they found here. Let them tell whatever remains of their kind. He looked at the stars, at the space they had saved, at the billions of lives that would continue because of this moment. Let them remember humanity. The council chamber was silent as stood before the assembly. 3 weeks had passed since the battle. The silence was gone, driven back to the void. Damaged sectors were being rebuilt. Refugees were returning to worlds that had been evacuated. The galaxy was safe again, for now. But everything had changed. "The humans saved us," said. His voice was quiet but clear, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "They lost 40% of their fleet. Over 2 million soldiers died. Young men and women who had trained their entire lives for a battle they hoped would never come. They sacrificed themselves for species that laughed at them for 50 years. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle on the assembled council members. Many could not meet his eyes. "We called them paranoid, we called them foolish, we called them primitive and childish. We told them that their weapons were unnecessary and their fears were unfounded. We scoffed at their preparations. We mocked their caution. We laughed at them behind closed doors and them to their faces." He lowered his head. "We were wrong. We were so terribly, arrogantly wrong." High Counselor Merck's crystal form pulsed slowly with dim light. He was diminished now, his light weaker than before. The fear of the past weeks had taken something from him that might never return. The certainty that had defined his leadership was gone. "What do you propose, Counselor?" Straightened and looked around the chamber at the faces of leaders who had trusted in peace and nearly paid for that trust with extinction. "I propose that we learn. I propose that we study humanity's ways, not their violence but their wisdom. They do not want war. They never wanted war. But they knew that wanting peace was not enough. They prepared for the worst while hopping for the best. That is not paranoia. That is wisdom. That is survival." He took a step forward. "We must build defenses. We must create emergency protocols. We must prepare for threats we cannot yet imagine, not because we want conflict, but because conflict does not ask for permission. It simply arrives. And when it arrives, we must be ready." The council murmured among themselves. Some looked uncomfortable with the idea of military preparation. Others nodded slowly, understanding at last what had been obvious to humanity all along. "The humans have offered to help us," continued. "They do not hold grudges for our mockery. They do not demand apologies for our arrogance. They will share their knowledge freely. They will train our people. They will help us become what we should have been all along. Not warriors, but survivors. Not aggressive, but prepared." He took a deep breath. The universe scoffed at humanity's age-old caution. We joined in that scoffing eagerly. We were so sure of ourselves, so certain that we knew better, but the truth struck fierce, and now we see clearly. Humanity was right. They were always right, and if we are wise, we will never forget this lesson. The vote was unanimous. The council accepted humanity's offer. They began the long process of building something they had never had before. Not military might for conquest, defensive strength for survival, emergency preparations for disasters yet to come. And through it all, humanity stood beside them, patient, helpful, never gloating, never saying "I told you so," simply ready as they had always been. Because that was what humans did. They prepared, they waited, they survived. And when the darkness came, they burned it away. 1 year after the battle, a memorial was built at the site of the final engagement. It floated in space, a massive structure visible from light years away. The names of every human who died were carved into its surface in letters that would last forever. 2 million names, each one a life given for others who had mocked them. At the dedication ceremony, the new High Counselor, a young named Sira who had been chosen to lead the council into this new era, spoke to the assembled species. "We gather here to remember those who saved us," she said. Her silver skin gleamed in the light of distant stars. "They did not save us because we deserved it. We did not deserve their sacrifice. We had laughed at them, scorned them, dismissed their wisdom. They saved us because they believed that all life has value. They saved us because that is who they are. She paused as her words echoed across the void. The humans have a word that we did not truly understand before: sacrifice. It means giving something precious for others. It means putting the needs of many above the needs of self. The humans understand this word. They live it in everything they do. They died for it here. She turned to look at the memorial, at the endless list of names carved in stone and light. Each name was a person, a family, a life cut short so that others could continue. We will not forget. We will learn from their example. We will grow stronger and wiser. And we will honor their sacrifice by becoming worthy of it, not by becoming warriors who seek conflict, but by becoming wise beings who prepare for it, by being ready, by never again scoffing at caution. She raised her hand in the human gesture of respect that had spread throughout the galaxy. Around her, 1,000 species from every corner of known space did the same. Thank you, humanity. Thank you for being paranoid when we told you not to be. Thank you for being stubborn when we asked you to change. Thank you for checking under the bed for monsters every night when we laughed at you. Her voice rang across the void, carried by speakers to every ship, every station, every world watching. Thank you for being ready when the monsters were real. Far away on a small blue planet called Earth, Director Sarah watched the ceremony on a screen in her simple room. She was old now, very old. 93 years of watching the stars, preparing for the worst, hopping for the best. Her hair was white as snow. Her hands shook with age, but her eyes were still sharp, still watching, still thinking about tomorrow. She smiled her sad smile one last time. "We hoped we were wrong," she said softly to the empty room. "Every single day for 50 years, we hoped we were being foolish. We hoped the galaxy was right and we were just paranoid children afraid of nothing. We prayed that we would never need our weapons, our bunkers, our preparations." She looked at the screen, at the memorial bearing 2 million names of humans who had died for strangers. But hopping is not enough. It was never enough. You have to prepare, you have to be ready. You have to survive long enough to hope again tomorrow. She closed her eyes, exhausted but at peace. Now they understand. Now they will prepare too. Now they will survive. Outside her window, the sun set over the mountains in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Children played in the streets below, laughing and running without fear. Ships launched from the nearby spaceport, heading to stars that were finally safe. Humanity had done what humanity always did. They had prepared for the worst. They had faced the darkness. They had survived. And somewhere, in the deep void between galaxies, the silence huddled in the cold emptiness. They remembered the small creatures who had burned them with artificial stars. They remembered the pain and the loss, and the humiliation of being driven back by beings younger than some of their memories. They would not return, not for a long, long time, perhaps not ever. Because they had learned what the entire galaxy had learned. Humanity was cautious. Humanity was prepared. Humanity was stubborn and paranoid and impossible to surprise. They kept weapons under their pillows and emergency plans in their hearts. They hoped for the best while preparing for the worst. And that made humanity the most dangerous thing in the universe. Not because they wanted to destroy. They did not seek conquest or power or domination, but because they would never, ever stop fighting to survive. Because they would never stop protecting those who needed protection. Because when the monsters came, humanity was ready. That was the truth that struck fierce. That was the lesson the universe would never forget. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, check under the bed for monsters. And when you find them there, fight. The humans had been right all along.